Here is part 1, 500 words, of the faceless story based on the title. OMG, he pressed so deep I couldn't breathe. Story version title. He went so deep into my life. I could barely breathe. Puzzle piece part 1. The unexpected guest, 500 words. It started on a Thursday, the kind of rainy evening where the sky looks bruised and heavy. The type of night you wrap yourself in a blanket, sip tea and shut the world out. That was my plan until Liam called. His voice was calm but empty. Hey, I know it's random, but could I crash at your place for a couple nights? Things just blew up. I hadn't spoken to Liam in months. We were friends once, close enough to share secrets but distant enough for time to drift between us. Still, something in his voice pulled at me. When he arrived, soaked from the rain, holding a duffel bag and carrying eyes that had clearly forgotten sleep, I realized this wasn't just about a place to stay. This was about escape. He barely said a word when he walked in. Just dropped his bag, looked around, and forced a crooked smile. I offered him a towel, then some leftover pasta, and we sat across from each other, eating like strangers who had once shared something warm. He didn't offer details, and I didn't ask. I figured the silence was safer than forcing open a wound he wasn't ready to explain. Instead, we talked around the edges. Old memories, new music, shows we never finished. The first night, he slept on the couch. I could hear him shifting often, restless. I almost offered him my bed, but something told me to keep things simple. That line, once crossed, can't be uncrossed. By the second day, he seemed lighter, still quiet but less hollow. He made coffee in the morning, folded his blanket neatly, even offered to cook dinner. We shared a few smiles, some genuine laughs. The way he looked at me lingered a second too long once or twice. But I didn't comment. That evening, as thunder rumbled in the distance, we sat on the floor with a blanket over our shoulders and a candle flickering between us. There was something safe about the storm, like it muted the outside world so we could listen to things we normally drowned out. He looked at me and said softly, "You ever feel like you're finally breathing only when you're around someone who doesn't expect anything from you?" I didn't know how to respond. His eyes were red, not from crying but from holding it all in too long. We didn't touch. We didn't flirt. But something passed between us, unspoken, undeniable. That night, as I lay in bed, I realized something had shifted. Liam wasn't just a guest anymore. He had entered the quiet corners of my life, pressing gently into the spaces I thought were long closed off. I didn't know what it meant. I didn't know what would come next. But deep down, I knew the storm outside wasn't the only one forming. Here is part 2, 500 words, of the story titled, He Went So Deep Into My Life. I Could Barely Breathe. Part 2, Crossing Lines Slowly. Puzzle piece part 2. Crossing lines slowly, 500 words. The next morning felt different. Not dramatically, but enough to notice. Liam was already awake, standing by the window with a cup of coffee, watching the rain as if it were speaking to him. Couldn't sleep. Yes. He smiled faintly. Didn't want to. We spent most of the day doing nothing, just existing in the same space. He helped me with laundry, and we cooked lunch together, brushing past each other in the kitchen more times than necessary. Every touch felt accidental. Every look intentional. It wasn't romantic in the usual sense. There was no flirting, no seduction. Just this quiet build-up of trust and tension, like we were tiptoeing toward a line neither of us had drawn, but both could see. Later that afternoon we watched a movie. Something light, something forgettable. I wasn't really watching, and I don't think he was either. Somewhere between the second and third act, I felt his head lean slightly against my shoulder. I didn't move. He stayed like that, silent, breathing evenly. Eventually, I shifted just enough to rest my head against his. And for a while we stayed like that, connected, barely touching, yet completely intertwined. It wasn't about attraction, not really. It was about safety. About the comfort of being near someone when the world felt too loud. "I used to feel this with her," he whispered. "That peace. But only in the beginning. His words lingered, hanging heavy in the dim light. I wanted to say something, anything, but nothing felt right. So I let the silence hold us. That night, he didn't go back to the couch. We didn't talk about it. I just walked into my room and he followed. We didn't sleep together. Not in that way. He stayed on top of the blanket, just inches away, like a line drawn in soft chalk. But his hand found mine under the covers, and I let it. I lay awake listening to the rhythm of his breath. I felt it change when he drifted off, slower, deeper, calmer. And with every inhale, he seemed to settle further into something. Or maybe into me. I tried not to read too much into it. Maybe he just needed closeness, a reminder that he wasn't alone. Maybe I was just a temporary escape. But even as I told myself those things, a quiet part of me hoped it was more. In the dark, his fingers moved slightly, wrapping tighter around mine. Just enough to make me catch my breath. And for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel alone either. But I also knew something else. We were getting too close. And soon something was going to break. Puzzle Piece Part 3. Too deep, too fast, 500 words. It happened on the fourth night. The power had gone out. Lightning cracked too close, and the apartment sank into darkness. Just the sound of wind against the windows and our breathing in the quiet. I lit 2 candles, placed them on the coffee table, and we sat on the floor again, close but not touching. The flicker of the flames cast golden shadows across his face. His eyes looked tired but clear, like the storm outside had stripped away whatever he'd been hiding behind. "I don't think I ever loved her the way I thought I did," he said suddenly, voice low, almost swallowed by the wind. "I think I was just afraid to be alone." I didn't answer right away. The weight of his honesty settled between us. He turned to me. "But with you, it's like I can finally breathe. And that scares me more." He reached out slowly, not with urgency but with certainty, and tucked a strand of hair behind my ear. It was such a small, soft gesture. But it undid me. I didn't stop him when he leaned in. Didn't pull away when his lips touched mine. It wasn't desperate. It was slow, like we were both afraid to break whatever this was. The kind of kiss you feel in your chest before your lips. It deepened gradually. His hand at the back of my neck, his breath sinking with mine. And then, everything collapsed. Time, distance, logic gone. We fell into each other, pulled by something too strong to name. Not just want, need. Emotional, silent, full of everything we'd both been holding back. There were no clothes shed in haste, no graphic motions. This was more than physical. It was emotional entanglement, raw and consuming. As his arms wrapped around me and our bodies pressed close, I felt it. Not just him but the weight of him. The way he held me, the way he buried his head in the crook of my neck like he'd finally found rest. It was overwhelming. His touch, his closeness, the warmth of his breath. It all pressed so deep I couldn't breathe. But it wasn't fear. It wasn't suffocation. It was surrender. I had never felt anything like it. Not just the intensity but the intimacy. As if he had cracked open my chest and settled inside. At one point he whispered, "I don't want this to be a mistake." "It's not," I whispered back. But even as I said it, a small voice inside me trembled. Because sometimes the deepest moments don't last. Sometimes they leave scars instead of promises. And in that moment, wrapped in him, drowning in emotion, I wasn't sure if I was finally found. Or just completely. Puzzle Piece Part 4. When I woke up, the first thing I noticed was the silence. The rain had stopped. Power was back. Morning light crept through the curtains, soft and golden, filling the room with a sense of calm. I reached across the bed, still half asleep. But my hand met cold sheets. Liam was gone. First I thought maybe he was in the kitchen. Or the shower. I even checked the couch. But the apartment was still. Too still. Then I saw it. A folded note on the nightstand, weighed down by the ring he always wore on his right hand. "I wish I could stay. Really do. But I came here to escape, not to heal." And I'm not ready to face what this could become. You gave me something I didn't know I needed. And something I'm scared I'll ruin if I stay. Thank you for letting me breathe again. L. I read the note 3 times. The words didn't sting, they sank. It wasn't anger I felt. It wasn't betrayal either. It was something quieter. Better. Like waking from a beautiful dream and realizing it can't follow you into daylight. For a moment I just sat there, holding the ring, feeling the outline of him in the empty sheets. His scent still lingered. The warmth hadn't completely faded. But I knew he wasn't coming back. He hadn't left because of me. He left because of himself. Because he needed space to figure out who he was without someone else filling the cracks. I understood that. I respected it. But that didn't make it any easier. Later that day I took a walk. The sun was out for the first time in days. The sidewalks were still wet, reflecting pieces of the sky. Everything looked washed clean. I stood beneath a tree we used to walk past during college, and I let the silence settle inside me. I thought about Liam. About his voice, his laugh, the way he said my name like it was something he didn't want to let go of. I thought about how he held me like he needed me. And maybe for a moment he did. But some moments aren't meant to last. Some people are just storms passing through. Loud, overwhelming, unforgettable. He came into my life so deeply, so quickly I could barely breathe. And now that he was gone, finally could. But I wasn't the same. Something had shifted. I had felt something real, even if only for a few nights. And I would carry that with me. Not as regret, but as proof. Proof that I could still feel. Still connect. Still love. Even if just for a moment.